Independent education provider Curro Holdings managed to grow its pupil numbers for the first half of this year by 6.6%. The company also posted an increase in headline earnings of 31.4% in the reporting period. The company has soldiered on with its growth strategy, making several acquisitions despite the prevailing economic conditions. Joining me now to talk more about these numbers and the outlook for Curro Holdings is Andries Greyling, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Curro Holdings. As always, Andries, thank you very much for giving us some of your time this evening. I've mentioned there very briefly in my intro that you were able to grow learner numbers, which indicates an appetite for private schooling from parents. But what were some of the other contributors in the interim growth that you saw?
Good evening. If you look at Curro, and over the last 10 years, we established 77 campuses, 180 schools throughout Southern Africa. So we put down our footprint, and our first strategy was to rapidly cover the whole of Southern Africa and make sure that we've got our schools all over. So what we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years is that our intake in grade 8, our learner numbers are really increasing from about 4,000 per grade to where it currently is at 6,800. So a lot of our schools are starting to fill up, even though 70% of our schools are still younger than 10 years. When we open a new school, we will only do it up till grade 8, and then you're facing grade 9, 10, 11 and 12 in adjacent years. So we are seeing that our schools are filling up, as well as higher intake, specifically in our high school grade 8, which is pleasing for us.
Does that indicate, Andries, that parents are not struggling financially like one would assume given the current economic backdrop, that they're willing to spend a few extra rands for the private education for their children? Or are you finding that you are having to create arrangements or anything of the sort with parents so that they are able to meet their obligations to the schools?
Over the brands we establish is a brand from our DG8, which is a bit lower fees, up to a more select brand, which is higher fees. So what we've seen over the years is that when parents are starting to struggle, they will leave the more expensive brand, but still stay within our school segment, and then go into a more affordable brand that they can support. So our bad debts is still a bit higher than what it was pre-COVID. It's 4% of our turnover, but glad to say it's stabilizing compared to last year's bad debt. So even though it's higher than pre-COVID, I think it's for us now still a figure that we can manage and is happy to live with. Our parents, we've seen about 3,500 to 4,000 of our learners moving within our group. Not all of them, moving from one brand to another. It also includes relocation. But for us, it's well received within our group.
So you did resume annual fee increases. You had given some relief at the peak of the pandemic. Has this been received well? Are you finding that everybody is complying with the enrollment fees, the annual fee increases that you have reintroduced in the schools?
We've got two sources of income. The one is obviously our school fee income, and then the other is ancillary revenue. That will be our boarding facilities, bus fare, aftercare, etc. So obviously opening up later this year and being allowed only to cross borders a bit later in 2022, we weren't able to increase our boarding facilities. So that's way lower than what it was pre-COVID. And as I think we are back to normality, we can now, grow that segment again. So that was one area that negatively affected us. But I must say, overall, the normality is coming back, and we can see all areas within our fee structures are growing.
And finally, Andries, Curro Holdings has been on a big drive to grow and spread its footprint across all its different markets. The acquisitions that you've made, what are you telling investors or anyone who's interested in Curro Holdings as a company about the growth opportunities and, of course, the integration of digital within the schooling system?
The first phase was to establish our 80 campuses, which we've done. We created capacity. The next phase for us is to increase our return on assets and our utilizations, which I'm glad to say grew from 60 to 64% currently in this year. So for us, we invested heavily since 2012 in our bandwidth IT infrastructure. So surprising what we are delivering to our market now since COVID is that a hybrid offering in our high school. So our learners in grade 8 to 12 got a choice. If a subject is not offered at their specific school, they can do that subject via remote learning and give them a bit more freedom and choice within their world. So our big expansion growth will be in that area, as well as filling up our campuses. We're getting to that point where our cash flow and our capital outlay is more or less in line. We don't have to go and finance material amounts. And now just fill up our schools. And I think as the economy is also will hopefully be returning back, whoever knows when. But the reality is I think we've been able as a group to change our value offering in a short space of time, get 60,000 learners offsite, make sure that they write grade 12 the last 2 years without having a negative results in grade 12. And I think that also enhance our product offering and enhance our brand within our market segment.
Thank you very much, Andries Greyling, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Curro Holdings, breaking down the results that they released today, interim results, that is.